To samo dotyczyło podziękowań dla prawdziwych patriotów, morderców Żydów z NSZ, z Brygady Świętokrzyskiej. To samo uznania dla żołnierzy wyklętych, ze szczególnym wskazaniem na Józefa Kurasia Ognia.
Dość tego.
Brawo!
Last week, Professor Jan Grabowski tried to deliver a lecture about the Polish problem with the history of the Holocaust at the German Historical Institute in Warsaw. It was shut down by Konfederacja parliamentarian Grzegorz Braun. What was the context of this event? I'll explain what happened and analyze some of the reactions since. Longtime subscribers to this channel will be familiar with Professor Jan Grabowski. I've clipped his speeches several times over the years. He first came to my attention years ago as one of the Holocaust historians brought to court in Poland for falsely claiming a Polish mayor had helped Holocaust 22 Jews. This case was widely reported in the foreign press as an attack on academic freedom. In my opinion, Jan Grabowski is part of a current, bigger Holocaust revisionist effort to change the narrative of Poles as bystanders or victims to Poles as perpetrators of a Holocaust. It's important to note that this narrative has been evolving over time. Historian Norman Davies says that when he was a young historian, the Israeli embassy in London instructed him and his colleagues to describe Poles as passive bystanders and not as victims. But now it seems it is time to change Poles from bystanders to perpetrators. Here are two clips of Jan Grabowski, first at a lecture in the Netherlands, then seething with his colleagues about the fact that a memorial was built to a Pole who allegedly was shot by the Germans for giving water to Jews.
If it's impossible to slow down the state-sponsored commemoration of own heroism, one could at least try to enrich the narrative. Each and every time when a new commemorative plaque is unveiled, or monument, each time a new monument is erected to honor Poles rescuing the Jews, let's commemorate Jews who in the same location, on the same street, have been denounced or killed by the Poles. I guarantee that finding the relevant information should not be a problem. Need be, I'll be glad to offer assistance and provide references. It's the fact that each and every survivor, Jewish survivor, who emerged from the war had very many of his close friends and family members die at the hands of the Poles or being denounced by the Poles. Now, the millions who were dragged screaming and shouting to death chambers at Treblinka left no memory at what's going on the Polish-Belarusian border. If you look at the kind of language which is being used to depict and to exclude foreigners, most of all let's say, of a different pigmentation of skin. It harkens back to the darkest years, actually, of the 1930s and 1940s. The imaginary of the imaginary Jew, the way the Jews have been depicted, is being applied in the official discourse today. So as I mentioned, this conflict with the past, it percolates and hits us on the face today in the context of current political events.
The main problem is, well, the only source upon which the public institution established this small monument was a single account by a single person recorded 40 years after the war. So don't we really have heroes with a stronger record, stronger evidence that we have to honor someone who has such a dubious record for his death?
Just to jump in to finish the story, but very briefly, I do agree with Dariusz more than I do agree with Konstanty.
Imagine if this exact criticism was applied to the Spielberg archive of testimonies. When a professor from the Polish Institute of National Remembrance was invited to give a talk in Canada entitled Poles Saving Jews, Grabowski wrote a letter to the dean of a university to loudly protest, and that he was encouraging people to come and voice their objection. So that gives you some context about Jan Grabowski, who have won many awards, including Canada's most prestigious science award. For the record, Professor Grabowski's father, originally named Abrahamer before he changed the family name, survived the war in Warsaw, probably with the help of Poles, and was probably in more danger from Jewish collaborators, something his son doesn't often mention. There's been little reaction inside of Poland by politicians and media. Why? Partly because it was hosted by the Germans, and there's a narrative in Polish politics against this. There was even a protest outside the lecture by a man associated with peace, so peace can't criticize. TVN does push the guilty Pole narrative to its viewers, but doesn't want to be seen as being German Ununza going into an election. There's a lot going on in Poland right now. No one touched it. Internationally, a lot of Jewish Holocaust groups, such as Yad Vashem and the U.S. Holocaust Museum, criticized Braun and said that Poland should support free speech on the Holocaust, which is more than a little hypocritical, given that they applaud Facebook censoring discussions that they don't like. When it comes to academic freedom, what do these organizations think about Germer Rudolph, a German chemistry PhD student who was jailed for his thesis? Do they think this was wrong? Finally, I'd like to directly address Professor Grabowski. Professor, if you are watching this video, you often state you should have a right to conduct your historical work without interference of a Polish state, without legal threats from the state. My questions are, should Professor Dariusz Radoszak have had the same rights? He was brought to court and convicted because of his history book. Should Poland apologize for jailing a history professor from the University of Opole? Should Poland change its laws to get rid of restrictions of free speech about history? If not, why not? Do you just want freedom for yourself to denigrate the Polish nation and threats of imprisonment for others who speak about the same topic? If so, aren't you a massive hypocrite?